Thank you for watching. I watched another Ken Ham debate. Did I say Ken Ham? Kent Hovind. I watched something about Ken Ham recently. That got the name in my mind. Both of their names start off with the same three letters and the same sound. Ken, K-E-N. So sometimes I might get their names mixed up. But this one is Kent Hovind versus Godless Engineer, hosted by Modern Day Debates, the YouTube channel. Here's a summary of it. And Kent Hovind definitely won it. The Godless Engineer, he was drinking beer in the middle of the debate. Kent Hovind gave his usual introduction and summary of himself. This debate was supposed to be focused on, did the flood of Noah happen? Did it happen or not? The debate wasn't whether we can learn something from it, even if it didn't happen. Did it happen or not? Kent's evidence, the Bible says so. He cited old legends. There are many flood myths all over the world, and cultures all over the world. And Kent Hovind's claim is all those stories are there because there was a real, actual flood, and that's what got the idea into everyone's heads. As they moved around, they would say, you know, the founders of the different civilizations would remember getting off of the boat, or remember their dad or grandfather who was on the ark with Noah, telling them about the flood, and they would pass the story along like that. Kent Hovind talked about strata. If there's a worldwide flood, you would expect layers of rock the way we have it. Godless Engineer had his term for in his opening statement. He claimed this is a debate between modern geology versus the Bible. He talked about uniformitarianism and catastrophism. He claimed that catastrophism is the belief that all things on the earth are the result of catastrophes. That's not an accurate summary of creationism. A creationist believes that God made the earth. So some things that are on the earth are here because that's the way God made it, and not every river, mountain, continent, etc. is from a catastrophe. There were some technical difficulties, and he rudely blamed them on Kent Hovind and took the chance to make some rude jokes or accusations against Kent Hovind. He claimed the worldwide flood, like described in the book of Genesis, would require more water than exists on the earth. He asked the question where the pressure would be that would push water up if there's a crack in the earth. He denounced the idea there's anything supernatural. He denies Mount Everest. He didn't claim Mount Everest isn't there. But he doesn't believe that Mount Everest is a recent creation. He thinks it's too old to match the story of the flood in the Bible. He said some ark ruins that Kent Hovind had showed were a natural formation of rocks and not the ruins of a boat. Kent Hovind explained that there is water under the crust of the earth, and all the weight of the rocks pushing down on the water will create the pressure needed for his theory to be plausible about the flood getting started off with cracks in the crust of the earth, letting that water up, and the pressure making that water shoot up with great amounts of energy, great speed. He pointed out the craters on the moon. The far side of the moon is smoother than the side facing us, and Kent Hovind postulates maybe those are craters that got put on the moon when the earth had the flood, and all that pressure from the water was shooting water up, and anything that the water was able to get a hold of and push. He pointed out catastrophism is not dead. It's still a viable theory. Kent Hovind said that in the late 1700s, there was a trend in the world to dislike the Bible because the Bible does have some verses in it to tell you to obey your king and obey your rulers, and people were trying to get rid of their kings, and so they didn't like this book that told them that, and he thinks that's one of the motivations behind trying to find a way to explain the historical evidence without it matching the Bible. Kent Hovind pointed out there's not a geologic column. By that, Kent Hovind does not mean there are not fossils in the ground, and he does not mean there are not unique rocks and formations. What Kent Hovind is saying is there is not a neat, orderly stacking up of all these different layers, one place in the earth where we can dig down and keep getting the different layers that the religion of evolutionism teaches. Let's see. Then it was Godless Engineer's turn to talk again. He claimed Kent Hovind's entire basis for what Kent Hovind said was it's in the Bible. But Kent Hovind never said it's only in the Bible and there's no other evidence of Noah's flood. Kent Hovind believes Kent Hovind has scientific evidence for a young earth, for the flood. He's got evidence there, more than just the Bible says so. Okay. Don't get theology and history. Let's see. Godless Engineer claimed that the Bible is there to teach theology. You're not going to get history out of a theology book, he says. I don't see how the two are mutually exclusive. Now, you might not get thorough explanations of things that are scientific out of a book that doesn't have that as its goal, but that doesn't mean it's not going to touch on things, mention some scientific facts here or there. Godless Engineer claimed the rounding of rocks that Kent Hovind had cited could just be from local floods, and it doesn't require a worldwide flood to get the rocks smoothed out the way we have some smooth rocks on the earth. A lot of them. Kent Hovind talked, and he said he pointed out he was lied about, that there's more than the Bible, and Kent Hovind said he'll admit something's wrong if there's some scientific proof he said something wrong. But Godless Atheist would never believe that his story is wrong. Okay, Kent Hovind talked about how old people used to be. There are many cultures that have legends about a time when people lived to be 1,000 years old. The Bible story, 900 something, is very close to 1,000. Kent Hovind looks at that as a good echoing of the Bible story. A Godless Engineer had a question for Kent that was something like, well, there are legends of dragons, so do you believe those too? Kent Hovind was believing the legends might have some truth to them if they echoed things in the Bible. Kent Hovind asked, why does Godless Atheist believe that an amoeba can turn into a whale? Let's see, and Godless Engineer didn't have a good answer. Kent Hovind quotes evolution. Okay, yeah, Kent Hovind quoted evolution. Godless Engineer, no, that's not how vestibular legs work. No, it's not how... Oh yeah, Kent Hovind accurately quoted the religion of evolution's belief. And Godless Engineer said, oh, that's not how evolution works. Kent Hovind thoroughly refuted the false accusation that whales have vestigial legs that prove, vestigial leg bones that prove they have an ancestor that walked on land. The godless engineer proved his immaturity by laughing at Kent Hovind's explanation about what those bones are for, and trying to get Kent Hovind to repeat it again after Kent Hovind had already explained it once. Those bones are used for reproduction. The male reproductive parts of the whales are attached to those bones, which are falsely accused of being vestigial leg bones. Because they've got to have some way to control their reproductive body parts when they don't have arms to pull the female whale in to do the mating. Then somebody put in the comments section something about returning to the topic, because they were starting to stray off from the topic. They had a discussion about erosion and what that would look like and what that would do. Kent Hovind pointed out that on the top of Mount Everest are petrified clams in a sealed and closed position. Now this proves rapid burial because clams, when they die, the two parts of the clamshell loosen up. The meat holding it together rots and it loosens up. So a closed clam must have been buried instantly and then fossilized like that. Godless engineer said that the current scientific geologic, called it a scientific geologic model, explains that by those being fossils from long, long ago that were just where Mount Everest ended up being when it got lifted up. But Kent Hovind asked, are there clams right now that are dying in the bottom of the ocean and fossilizing and staying closed? And Godless Engineer said that fossilization takes time, so no, they aren't. Kent Hovind went through a list of different fossilized things that prove that it can happen quickly. We have things that, if you just get the right combination of minerals in the water, you can get quick fossilization. And pointed out that there are some things like there's a place in Texas where they're taking turkey guts from a place that slaughters turkeys and packages them to be sold to stores so people can eat them. There's a place that turns those turkey guts into fuel in 20 minutes, I think it was, a very short time, proving it does not take millions of years to make fossils or to make fossil fuel. And Godless Engineers was worried that that wasn't in a lab, and no, he was saying the evolution doesn't happen in a lab, or fossilization doesn't happen in a lab. That's a really bad, stupid, weak argument. If something can be done in a lab, that proves it can be done at that speed. It doesn't prove every time it happens at that speed in nature, but it proves you get the right circumstances out in nature, you can get that thing. Then they went to the audience Q&A. There was an abortion tangent, question about abortion, which is not related to whether there was a flood or not. Materialism, they talked about whether they're materialist or not. The audience asked a question that said basically something like, machines don't evolve because they don't have genes. And that was a question for Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind pointed out accurately that life is more complex than a machine, and more complex means it's less likely, it's less plausible for it to be, less possible even for it to just be the result of random chance and had to have been designed. Godless Engineer claimed natural processes, it's logical, if they're natural processes that make things, for it to not be designed, and we can see design in things made by people. But Godless Engineer has never witnessed, and nobody has ever witnessed, the complex life happening. We've only seen life already there. I mean, reproducing, growing, but we've never seen life just spontaneously happen. So there isn't a natural process that's been seen to do the things that godless engineer is claiming. The audience asked a question about geology and oil, and Kent Hovind pointed out that there's a lot of backlash that you get now if you're trying to be a scientist or a high school teacher or something, and you don't believe the story of evolutionism. So that's not good proof. Claiming the majority does or doesn't believe something is not good proof, especially when you get punished for not believing something. But Ken pointed out, evolution doesn't help discover oil, and it doesn't create anything. He's right. They dig for oil and they find it, but they don't find the oil in a different place because they believe in millions of years or not. And there's never been an invention, something that made life better, or medical breakthrough based on the belief that at one point, trillions of years ago, or whatever that number is that somebody made up, there was a one-cell animal that became all life, and it's the ancestor of everything. Godless atheist was asked, godless atheist asked the question. Godless engineer asked the question, would a Christian kid in a Christian community believe the Bible? Because Kent Hovind pointed out some people believe things because it's all of what they hear. They don't hear other things. And some people believe evolutionism because that's the only thing they hear, especially when they hear it in school. They're supposed to trust what they learn in school, and so that's why they believe it. And Kent said yes. He asked if they should see both sides. Should kids in American high schools, basically he was asking, should they hear both sides of the argument? Should they hear reasons that people believe, Darwinism is wrong, and hear both sides, or evolutionism is wrong? And godless engineer said no. Proving, it's scary for somebody to say they don't want people to hear both sides of an argument or debate. I don't mind people hearing, both sides of things. And then the godless engineer said evolution was proven in a laboratory. But earlier in the debate, he denounced things happening in laboratories as not good proof of anything. Which one is it, man? He was trying to have it both ways, denouncing laboratories when it didn't help him, and calling for laboratories when he thought it did. Kent Hovind pointed out there's no fossil record. He's right, there are bones in the ground. But when you dig up a bone in the ground from a dinosaur or whatever animal it is, it doesn't have a label on it. You do some inferring about what the past was about it. There's definitely some guessing and inferring. And godless engineer accused Kent of comparing the bones in the ground to a Beatles album. No, Kent wasn't saying that. He accused Kent of using the equivocation fallacy, which is using one definition of one word, and when somebody agrees with that thing you're saying, using the word with a different meaning and claiming you proved it. But Kent didn't do that. Godless engineer proved how vulgar and rude he can be when he said it's fun to make fun of people who think God farted the universe out and sneezed to make man. Somebody from the audience asked a question about Psalms 104 and claimed that that is contradicted by Kent's belief that the flood in the days of Noah was a global flood. I looked into this a little bit because I made a video where I touched on that subject. It was about somebody who believes that Psalms 104 is a creation account. It's not. And somebody put a comment in my videos, and then I read it again. And no, Psalm 104 is not a creation account. It's giving God glory and credit. But when the Psalms 104 is talking about the waters coming off of the earth and never coming back again, That's talking about the flood in Noah's day. It's not talking about when God created the earth. And Kent Hovind pointed that out accurately. The audience asked Kent Hovind how he discerns between which parts in the Bible are a parable and which parts are real history. That's a reasonable question to understand, how somebody's coming to the conclusion this chapter is a parable. Learn something from it, but don't think it really happened. This chapter, that really happened. That's history. Kent Hovind said that one of his clues is if there's a proper name in it. So, for example, when we're talking about Noah's flood, it names Noah. It names his 3 sons. It doesn't name his wife. And in Genesis, it doesn't call for Hermione Granger to be there. But that's not a contradiction that they had her in that one movie. Well, of course, they didn't have Hermione Granger. They had the actress. Let's see. So then, Godless Engineer quoted. Wait, almost done. Quoted somebody named John Dominic Crossan, who he claims has proven the entire New Testament is a parable. No, it isn't. But I didn't look up that guy to see more details about him. I don't think I'd ever heard that before. The accusation that the entire... Make sure you close the door so I have less background noise. I don't think I heard that accusation before, that the entire New Testament is a parable. Audience question for Kent Hovind was, what do you do with the Old Testament flat earth verses? And Kent Hovind's answer was, there are none. And I agree with Kent Hovind. There are no verses anywhere in the Bible that are making a claim to a flat earth. Godless Engineer got one story slightly twisted, but I know what story he was talking about. When Jesus was being tempted by the devil, he was on a high mountain where he could see all the kingdoms of the earth, and the devil made him an offer. The Godless Engineer said Jesus was on a point and he saw 4 corners of the earth. It doesn't say 4 corners of the earth. His question for Kent Hovind is, what's your explanation about that? I guess the Godless Engineer is saying there's a flat earth verse. But Kent Hovind said you can use the internet to see the whole world right now. I guess Kent was hinting that, maybe the devil had some way for Jesus to see the whole world like that and not having the earth be flat. Then Kent Hovind, they brought up fossilization because Kent was accused of not understanding how fossilization works and happens, and he proved he understands it. They gave him a thorough explanation. Then the moderator went silent. But apparently the 2 people in the debate could hear what he was saying because Kent talked. And he said 20% of people that are in heterosexual marriages can't have babies, or some statistic like that. Marriage is not only about making the babies or something like that. And there are definitely only 2 genders. Whoever says there's 50-something genders needs to talk to his mommy. And then Pangea was brought up. Kent Hovind claims that's a dumb theory. Here's one example of where I disagree with Kent. Pangea is not a dumb theory. The continents could have moved around that much, to get to where they are. Kent Hovind's claim is when the Bible talks about all the continents being connected or one landmass, there was before the flood, when there was more water down under the crust, and the places where the ocean is shallow now were dry land, so people could go anywhere because there was dry land connecting everything. Godless Engineer claimed he had debunked the rapid burial of squid, but he didn't. I'm sure I've seen the pictures of the fossils. There are fossilized soft tissues that couldn't have happened over long periods of time. It had to have been a rapid burial. Then the moderator apologized for muting himself when he was asking the questions. He caught himself and apologized. There was an audience question about an algorithm based on DNA and evolution. Kent Hovind pointed out that similarity is not evidence for relatedness, and he talked about how the alphabet, people can write sentences with the alphabet, and there might be some similarity between the sentences, but that doesn't prove that one came from the other. That means there was somebody writing the sentences. Good analogy, good point. Audience question asked Kent Hovind, what makes evolution a religion? That's a good question to ask him, because he does make that accusation that evolutionism is a religion. Kent Hovind said you have to believe it. You have to take it on faith, because it's never been witnessed. Farmers always get the same kind of animal or crop or something. So since there is zero scientific evidence, then you have to believe it. What is believing something without scientific evidence? It's believing religiously. It's the good definition of religion. Godless Engineer said dogs always produce dogs, but a long time ago they didn't. And he claimed Kent Hovind's rant shows that Kent Hovind doesn't understand evolution. Wow, no. Kent Hovind ranted because he had something to say. And Kent Hovind does understand evolutionism. And those are the rest of my notes on this debate where Kent Hovind metaphorically slaughtered Godless Engineer, who, wow, maybe he's not even an engineer, I don't know. Kent Hovind definitely won this debate, and you have a good day. Thank you for watching.